Sorry for the late start. I got busy with other stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into the story. Okay, guys, we are back. We're going to be talking about a new executive order. The executive order was signed by President Trump and it deals with firearms and banking. Okay, so let's talk about what it says. It's just not about firearms and banking, but firearms is a big part of it because he signed an executive order forbidding banks from discriminating against certain companies, such as firearms companies. And this is a big deal. In order to see how big of a deal this is, we have to go back to the Obama administration. The Obama administration had something called Operation Chokepoint. Operation Chokepoint was an operation by the FDIC and the Department of Justice to put pressure on banks to stop doing business with certain companies like firearms companies, specifically firearms companies. That was a major part of it. Payday lenders also got rolled up into it, but firearms companies was the main target of Operation Choke Point. Back in 2014, the Wall Street Journal broke the story of Operation Choke Point, which was a secret. Basically, what was happening is that the DOJ and the FDIC was demanding customer names and information from any firearms companies dealing with banks. Also, they did what was called an unwritten suggestion or informal suggestion that these banks stop doing business with firearms companies. In addition to that, the FDIC also included gun dealers in a category of high risk for fraud and high risk for money laundering, which is kind of ridiculous because you have to go through a background check to buy a gun and you have to prove your identity, which is usually not a good place for fraud or money laundering because everyone has your identity. Money laundering businesses are like, if you watch Breaking Bad, car washes or laundry mats, places that are cash and carry businesses. That is because it is harder to trace the money. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the other businesses that gun companies during Operation Choke Point were associated with. They were rolled up in the same companies. They were in the same categories as companies selling drug paraphernalia, escort services, Ponzi schemes, and pyramid schemes. So they were lumped in there with all those companies. These companies were not suspected of doing anything wrong. So a lot of critics at the time said that these companies had their due process rights violated because they were requiring banks, they, as the Department of Justice and FDIC, were requiring banks to turn over information about these businesses without any probable cause, which is a big no-no if you look at the due process clause of the Constitution. There was a hearing in Congress about this, and it was blistering. In fact, the FDIC and the DOJ got sued by a lot of companies and settled a lot of the cases out of court. The categorization of firearms companies with escort services, drug paraphernalia, online gambling, uh, Ponzi schemes, and pyramid schemes, that was removed in 2014. The Operation Choke Point continued until 2017 when it was shut down after a report from Congress that was really, really blistering in 2017. Although Operation Chokepoint was shut down, there was still pressure by anti-gun groups on banks and credit card processors. One of the people that kind of buckled to this was Elevon. Elevon is a major credit card processor, and they stopped doing business with people selling 80% jigs and everything else before the 80% rule went into effect by the ATF. But these anti-gun groups still use something called reputational risk to pressure banks into stop doing business with firearms companies, and a lot of banks did. Reputational risk means that, you're gonna face boycotts or backlash from these anti-gun groups, and a lot of these banks cut off gun companies, a lot of these credit card merchants cut off gun companies from using their services, whether it was denying them loans or capital or just shutting down their accounts totally. There were several banks that stood up against this, but a lot of banks did not, and a lot of credit card merchants did not. A lot of the credit card merchants that would work with firearms companies charged exorbitant rates because they were facing the pressure, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna face this reputational risk, so you have to pay more." With this executive order, it is saying that banks cannot discriminate because of political beliefs. What's really funny is a lot of these anti-gun groups like to say that they're against all discrimination, which is kind of funny because they're against all discrimination unless that discrimination is for political means, like they don't like your political ideas. So therefore, they think that they can discriminate against you. We have seen banks kind of anticipate this action by the president and walk back their reputational risk stuff with firearms, such as Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo walked back their reputational risk stuff with firearms. Other companies, such as Discover, Visa, and MasterCard, they have also walked back a lot of their anti gun policies because I think that they knew this was coming. Everyone knew this was coming. This was 100% company coming. So we'll have to see what the outcome of this is. I know right now there's a lot of anti-gun groups that are not happy with the executive order, and to me that means I should be very happy with this executive order, and I am happy with this executive order. This does not just apply to firearms companies, it's basically anything political, because if you think about it, you really cannot act as a business without a bank. And the anti-gunners were using that to their advantage to try to try to put businesses out of business by using the banking system. So this is just taking one of their weapons away. They still use a lot of lawfare, but bank fare might be coming to an end. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but yeah, it is it is good. All right, guys. So, any questions before I go? I know a lot of people had questions about the U.S. Marshals dropping the P320, and I got a advanced copy of that email, but it was coming. If you read that email, it basically just said that that for abundance of caution. Robobank got in trouble for dealing with pot growers' money. Yeah, they did. That is a little bit different from gun dealers, even though I think banks should be able to deal with pot growers, just what I think. But federally, marijuana is still illegal. So it's a little bit different, but I don't think marijuana should be illegal at all. I don't think any drug should be illegal, to tell you the truth, but I'm very, very libertarian, and you guys could probably tell that. So I believe that all drugs and all substances should be illegal, even though I'm not going to do any, but just my libertarian views on stuff. If you make heroin illegal, I mean, legal today, are you going to go out and do heroin? Probably not. So, yeah, that's what I think. I think the whole war on drug stuff is a bunch of BS. But that's just me. All right, guys, that is it. Sorry for the delay there. I got busy with some other stuff, but here we are. And with that, we are going to get out of here. Making them illegal makes them go away. Works perfectly. 100%. Prohibition in the history of the world has never worked on anything. So there you go. All right, guys. I'll see you guys later. Have a great Friday. If I don't see ya, I don't think I'm gonna be doing any shows next week because I'll be out of the country. But if I do, I'll see you then. If not, have a great week. And everyone down at Goals, please be safe and have a fun time.